All right, tonight here on the Hill, two adversaries, two very different sets of problems. President Trump telling Putin to stop the strikes after more deadly drones fly into Ukraine. And tonight, China suggests that the president isn't telling the truth. But he says the two sides are talking.
But we've been ripped off for many, many years. The United States has been ripped off like no country probably in the history of the world has been ripped off for 45, 50 years.
So the commander-in-chief with those two issues before him in the Oval tonight. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Outside the Beltway as well, the former White House press secretary turned Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders pushing back against her old boss. The former head of FEMA is with us tonight on why the Republican governor is pleading with President Trump for federal help. Plus, you don't see this often, why California's governor, Gavin Newsom, is siding with the Trump administration, pursuing charges against an illegal immigrant in his state. But also a possible setback for the president tonight in his immigration crackdown, why a judge is trying to limit the president's ability to target sanctuary cities. And are you ready for some football? It is one of the most compelling nights in the sport, the NFL draft, why Congress may get involved in college sports after a big setback in a federal courtroom. But first tonight, here from the Hill, Putin, Xi, Trump. The commander-in-chief's next move on war and the president's response to China saying that he is not telling the truth. Our Kelly Meyer with us tonight outside the White House. So, Kelly, the big questions tonight involve really the biggest players on the world stage. Let's start with the president and Xi Jinping.
Yeah, hey there, Blake. So China says any talk of trade talks is, quote, fake news. President Trump insists talks are still happening between the two countries. Take a listen to this.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China.
So President Trump won't say who is involved in those discussions. Talks that are happening that we know of. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying they had a very successful bilateral meeting with South Korea today. He says they came early, they came with their A game, and we'll see if they follow through. Now, the director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, saying he has seen the list of countries that want to negotiate with President Trump this weekend while he's in Rome, and he says it's 3 pages, single-spaced. Blake?
All right. Reporters in the Oval Office today, Kelly, also pressing the president on where things stand with Russia and Ukraine after the recent strikes last night. What's the White House and the president saying tonight?
Yeah, so President Trump called for Russia's attacks on Ukraine to stop after the deadly overnight aerial attack on the capital of Kyiv. And when asked by reporters today, President Trump says he thinks Putin will listen and stop the attacks. But he also got defensive when reporters asked why he isn't putting more pressure on Russia. Listen to this.
We're putting a lot of pressure on Russia, and Russia knows that, and some people that are close to it know, or he wouldn't be talking right now. But it takes two to tango. And you have to have Ukraine want to make a deal, too.
So still keeping the pressure on Ukraine there, Blake. And Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, he's expected to meet with Russian President Putin in Moscow tomorrow for the 4th time just this year, Blake.
And Kelly, moments ago, you just reported Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, his right hand, his chief of staff, is out. What are you learning tonight?
Yeah, and this is someone that Hegseth himself said just 2 days ago was a great man and he wasn't going anywhere. He certainly wasn't going to be fired, he said. Now I'm learning from a source at the Pentagon that he's out. And that he isn't going to another spot in the Defense Department. He is going to go back to a government role or consulting, so completely leaving the Pentagon. So a change in rhetoric from the Pentagon, from saying that he wasn't going to be fired to now him being out. A source confirming to NewsNation tonight, Blake.
Change indeed. Our Kelly Meyer, live at the White House tonight. Kelly, thank you. So the president fancies himself as one of the top deal makers in the world, right? Well, we're 94 days into the second administration. So far, China is standing up against him, and there is no peace in Ukraine on the eastern side with Russia. So what is the president thinking right now, and where does he go from here? Mick Mulvaney, the president's former chief of staff, NewsNation contributor, live with us tonight here on the Hill. Hello, sir.
Hello, Berman.
There was a headline, Mick, in the Wall Street Journal that really caught my attention this morning, and here's what it was. Xi Jinping is ratcheting up China's pain threshold for a long fight with Trump. The reality is, Mick, that's a communist nation, and they are in it for a long fight, and Xi can just ratchet up the pain, as the Wall Street Journal puts it. The president's the president for the next 4 years and cannot go down this path. I know President Trump says he holds the cards and we hold the cards, but when you view it in that light, does he?
Yeah, it's a real risk. By the way, it's a risk with Russia as well. I think lots of folks in the West, in the United States of America, in Europe, misunderstand how much sort of deprivation these foreign dictators can put their own people through. Xi can put his own people through things in China that we could never get away with in the West. Yep. The same is true for Putin. So, I mean, I think it's part of the negotiating calculus that some of us get wrong in the West because we assume those leaders will act like ours will.
It's right. And whether you view it as rational thinking or not, right? On the issue of Russia and Ukraine, I think it was like 50 to 60 days into the first 100 days. I don't know. It was like a month or so ago, Mick. And you told me that you thought basically everything had been going to plan for Trump, right? All the headlines, whatever, set it aside. You basically said, yeah, they kind of expected all this up until this point, except for Russia and except for Putin. That's what you told me about a month ago. Here we are a month later, and the president had to take to social media today for a warning to Vladimir Putin. Is that still your thinking tonight?
Yeah, I think they've got a problem with Russia. I think they thought they'd have a deal by now, and they don't. They've got a problem with Ukraine. And Trump is absolutely spot on about that. There was an idea floated over this last couple of days about the U.S. recognizing Crimea as part of Russia, as part of a larger peace agreement, and the Ukrainians objected to that. Any peace deal is going to require the Ukrainians to go along. Trump really needs the Europeans to sort of squeeze the Ukrainians at this point and say, look, you didn't fight over Crimea in the first place. We know it's in your constitution that Crimea is part of Ukraine, but we need a peace deal here. You need a peace deal here. There's no way Crimea is ever going to be part of Ukraine in the foreseeable future. So they can't let Ukraine sort of throw a monkey wrench into these discussions. Trump has a real problem. He's got a problem with Russia and a problem with Ukraine.
Let me move you to the Trump Organization. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about the Trump Organization, they started selling this today on the website. Trump 2028. Mick, we know that he's term limited, a second term. We know that the White House had basically said, the only reason that this is an issue is because you guys keep asking him about it, and so he keeps answering. That's the Trump Organization saying, you know what? Bring it on. The thought is that either A, he's trolling, and or B, he wants to remind people that he's not a lame duck president, which he is. Is it that, or is something else going on here?
Well, I think it's a combination of A and B and C. And C is they're going to make some money off of this. I mean, they just are. It is. It's a Trump Organization thing. This is a profit center for them. Look, I think he's trolling. I really do. I think there's folks out there like Steve Bannon who are serious about it. But Steve, in my mind, sort of tends towards anarchist anyway. So he'd love to see something outrageous like that. But at the end of the day, look, Trump has got some bigger problems right now than 2028. Yeah. The economy is not where he wants it to be yet. And he doesn't need to worry about 2028 until he fixes the economy, fixes Russia, and fixes the relationship with China.
Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Thank you, sir. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Thanks, Blake.
All right. So the warning signs, meantime, are here. Supply chain disruptions could be coming as China tariffs kick in. The shipping industry is seeing the first signs of impact with significantly fewer U.S.-bound freight ships leaving Chinese ports. I wanted to take a moment here to sort of show you the state of play, right? Tariffs, they can be theoretical, but here's part of the reality. I want to show you the departures planned for the week of March 4th through 10th. According to Port Optimizer, the number of ships leaving China for Southern California expected to be down some 44% from the prior year. Now, here's how long it could take for goods to get from China to the U.S. by sea. We estimated using a 40-foot container, right, going from Chinese ports of Shanghai or Shenzhen to several major U.S. cities. This is how long it would take. To Los Angeles, up to 30 days. Houston, 45 days. You want to get over to the big cities in the East Coast, Miami, New York, you're talking, give or take, some 52 days. Now, these are broad estimates, and a lot of factors here, as you might imagine, play into how long that journey might take. But it gives you a frame of reference, really, for when we could actually feel the impacts of fewer goods potentially coming from China right here to the United States. Joining me now, NewsNation weekend anchor Anna Koyman. Hello, Anna. So, one of the threats, not really a threat, but one of the questions here and thinkings is, are we going to see empty shelves? What about that and sort of the other potential impacts?
Yeah, well, when you say these ships are not leaving with their big containers full of product, it's because these business owners are concerned they're not going to be able to pay the invoices once the product gets here, of course. Those warning signs, Blake, they are flashing across the industry, too. CEOs of several top retailers, including Walmart and Target, they warned that store shelves could run empty if trade tensions, especially with China, stay elevated. Ryan Peterson, he's the CEO of shipping platform Flexport, agrees this is possible.
It means if nothing gives, if nothing changes, he doesn't go forward with that, you're going to have massive shortages across the economy as these goods just stop showing up and stop being available on the shelves.
Well, the head of the President's Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, pushing back really hard on this idea. When asked if the shelves will run empty, he said no, absolutely not. Meanwhile, though, new numbers from the Yale University Budget Lab predict that even if shelves are indeed stocked, prices for everyday things that we use could be rising. Short-term price hike increases could be for all sorts of consumer goods. Food prices could rise 2.6%. Short-term prices on fresh produce could go up 4.5%. But the Budget Lab does note long-run increases at 3.6%, so a bit different there. If you're looking for a new car, those prices could go up to about 12% in the short run and then 15% they're predicting in the long haul. Even bigger potential impacts for clothing prices. Almost every single thing that's sold and imported into the United States, that's sold in the United States is imported. So short-term consumer prices could increase 65% for clothing and 87% for leather goods like shoes, handbags, and belts. So most of this clothing, Blake, does come from China, as we know, as well as Vietnam and Bangladesh. So more than 20% of our total apparel imports come from China alone. And their current tariff rate, as we know, for Chinese goods is 145%. The U.S. announced this Liberation Day tariffs on Vietnam of 46% and Bangladesh of 37%. But those tariffs have been relaxed as part of the 90-day pause. Both countries are subject to 10% baseline tariffs the United States has imposed. And to piggyback off what Mick was saying about those 2028, Make America Great Again, Trump, wanting to run supposedly with this hat, or the organization just sort of needling the idea around. He made money off the watches, he made money off the shoes, and these small business owners are going, well, we need to be making money and ourselves. And why are we doing this? Well, it just kind of doesn't square.
The question many are facing tonight. Our Anna Koyman, live for us. Anna, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, still to come tonight. By the way, check Anna out, NewsNation Now on the weekends, 1 to 4 Eastern. All right, that is a live look. Lambeau Field, the NFL draft later tonight, don't you know? Now, while the focus will be on the pros tonight, a big decision last night from a federal judge that could impact your alma mater, the colleges. Why Congress may be getting involved after a big court decision. Plus, the president and his old press secretary, Sarah Sanders. Why the Trump administration is denying federal aid to Arkansas after recent storms. The former director of FEMA with us live here on the Hill. And the president's border agenda meets the court system. How his crackdown on sanctuary cities just might have hit a wall. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the Center of Politics. You're watching The Hill. We're back in 4 minutes. National Football League just 2 hours away from kicking off this year's NFL draft. The Tennessee Titans, Cleveland Browns, New York Giants set to have the first 3 overall picks. And some of the biggest names in college football about to have their childhood dreams lived out. Now it comes as the NCAA and college sports as a whole is on the verge of undergoing some massive changes. A federal judge just delaying what has become known as the House settlement. That's the NCAA's historic $2.8 billion deal that essentially would create a system for schools to directly pay their players, in part at least. Now, NIL, name, image, and likeness, has become a major issue in college sports. Essentially, it's a way for the college athletes to be paid for their performance out on the field like you and I do every single day. You go out, you work, do your job, which some folks say this is. You get paid. The deals could be worth millions of dollars. Now, this caught Congress's attention, but there are questions about reforming the NCAA and whether Congress should step in. Now, earlier this month, the commissioners, the head coaches, and athletic directors from the Power Four conferences met with lawmakers here up on Capitol Hill lobbying for federal NIL guidelines. The Texas Senator Ted Cruz has been looking into this. He introduced legislation to help settle the NIL debate, but says the government should not set the rules. To show what's at stake, Arch Manning, the University of Texas quarterback, member of the famous Manning family, is generally considered to have the highest NIL valuation, somewhere around $6 million. With me now, the congressman from Utah, Republican Burgess Owens, the only member of Congress to play in the NFL, win a Super Bowl, and he would also tell you, played at the University of Miami. Congressman, nice to see you, sir. Always great to have you here on the Hill.
Same here, buddy. Look forward to it.
There was this big setback last night with the House settlement. The judge, the federal judge in the case, basically said, no, I don't like limits on how many players there can or cannot be. When it comes to Congress, what do you think Congress should do, and what do you think it's actually going to do, if anything?
Well, I think there has to be something done here, Blake. And I'm one of those guys, I have not really dug in deeply with this. We have some of my colleagues, thank goodness, that this is what they live and breathe and they understand the concepts. The key is we have to keep in mind that we don't want our college to become a pro league. And what I fear most of all things is not the money piece, it's the character piece. It's the idea that there's a sense of camaraderie, of loyalty, all the things that we do to develop young character, young men with athletics does. We're going to end up losing that if we allow this to continue going like the Wild Wild West. So again, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm watching, anticipating that we have to have some kind of guidelines across the country, federal and federalized. But I do hope we get our hands on this, because our kids' future and the character of our country really depends on how we approach athletics and what we get out of that.
You were a college athlete, right? And let's just focus on our two schools, right? And I don't mean to pick them out, but you went to Miami, I went to Michigan. At Miami and Michigan, we don't tell the nursing students what they can and cannot do. We don't tell the education majors what they can and cannot do. Congress doesn't, right? So if that's the case, why does Congress need to step in for this?
Well, because there should be a level playing field. You're talking about, first of all, an industry of millions and millions, billions of dollars, basically, and you're talking about a sport in which
does there need to be a level playing field, though? I would think sort of conservative thinking would be let it all out there and merit. And best person wins, right? Best university wins.
That's fine if you want to destroy college football. I mean, I totally get it. If you want to just bring the money in and just let it go, let it have it, then we will have a second pro league, which will start us off in high school, college right now, maybe down in high school at some other point. But we want to hold on to what we all feel we're excited about, what we remember seeing, the love of the sport, the characters develop, the idea that we can have sports across the board. We have this remarkable loyalty to our teams. If we want to hold on to that, then we have to make sure that we do not let college becomes another pro league. If we do that, then go for it, but just know we're not going to have the same results as the years go on. All
right. Your colleague, other side of the aisle, other chamber, Democrat, Alyssa Slotkin. Since we're talking about the NFL draft tonight, I want to bring your attention to comments she made about the Democratic Party. And I know you don't give Democrats advice, but here's what she said. She said she is urging Democrats to bleeping retake the flag with appeals to voter sense of patriotism, to adopt the bleeping alpha energy of the Detroit Lions coach Dan Campbell, and to embrace an airing out of potential 2028 presidential candidates. Dan Campbell there on your screen. You think she's on to something there? Basically saying that Democrats need to be a lot more like Dan Campbell?
I'll tell you, at the end of the day, what people are looking for is something authentic. You're right. We're looking for patriotism. We're looking for masculinity again. We're looking for that, but you can't talk your way into it. There has to be something that's natural, that you feel it. And that's the authenticity that American people are seeing with the Republican Party right now. When I stand and put my hand on the heart and have a teary eye, that is real. That's not something to get a vote. And so the Democrats have to either find their way back to understand that the love of country comes first, family, respect, all those things. If they can't do that, then American people are going to go a different way. There's no question about it. We want authenticity. We want what we all believed in was the good culture that we kind of grew up in, for sure.
The Congressman, Burgess Owens, Republican from Utah. Always nice to see you, sir. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Blake. All the best, buddy.
You got it. All right, still much more ahead tonight. Here on the Hill, severe weather. leaving a trail of destruction in Arkansas. But the Trump administration is denying the state's federal disaster aid response. It's basically the president and his former press secretary, the former head of FEMA, with us. And a surprise ally is actually coming to the president's side. Guess who? When we return. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. 6:30 here in Washington, and the White House does not appear to be playing favorites when it comes to disaster relief, giving one ruby red state somewhat of the cold shoulder, at least so far. Arkansas is currently dealing with the aftermath of storms that took 3 lives, injured dozens, and caused billions in damage in March. But the administration has turned down multiple requests to declare a major disaster, saying the damage wasn't severe enough to require federal assistance. They also said the state was capable of handling it. Now remember, this is what President Trump said about disaster recovery in his first few days in office when he visited North Carolina in January.
FEMA just hasn't done the job, and we're looking at the whole concept of FEMA. I like, frankly, the concept when North Carolina gets hit, the governor takes care of it. When Florida gets hit, the governor takes care of it, meaning the state takes care of it.
Now, the Arkansas governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president's former press secretary in his first administration, penning a 17-page letter to her former boss asking for help, saying in part, quote, "I respectfully ask that you consider the significant strain the citizens of Arkansas have endured over the past month," end quote. She has since appealed the denial of federal aid. Now, the state's entire congressional Republican delegation followed up, also urging the president's administration to reconsider. Governor Sanders appearing a little bit more optimistic in an interview today, saying, quote, "We expect this to be processed quickly, and we've provided additional and extra information that bolsters the need. At the end of the day, though, I've talked to the president, I've talked to Secretary Noem. We want to make sure that the people are taken care of." So what's at play here? Arkansas has been granted an emergency declaration, which provides up to $5 million in aid. Major disaster declarations, on the other hand, do not have a fixed limit for federal assistance. So far this year, there have been 11 major disaster declarations issued across 9 different states, including in California, for those wildfires. Now, when it comes to emergency declarations, in 2025, there have been 4 across 3 states this year, all having to do with severe storms, tornadoes, and flooding. With me now, a man who knows a thing or two about this, the former head of FEMA under President George W. Bush, Michael Brown. Michael, it is nice to have you back here on the Hill once again.
You bet. Likewise. Good to see you.
You as well. So this is an interesting one for a lot of reasons, right? At the headline, you've got the president and his former press secretary, the former press secretary saying, look, help us out here in Arkansas. I just kind of laid out there sort of the different levels of aid as you see it. As the former head of FEMA, how do you look at this one tonight?
Well, let's look at it, in D.C. speak, let's look at it from a 30,000-foot level.
Okay.
What the president is saying and what he said back at the beginning in that bit that you played, he's absolutely correct. It's the responsibility of the states first and foremost. And what we've done over the course, since 1979, and it's progressively gotten worse and worse, is states have become more and more dependent upon the federal government anytime there's a natural disaster of any size, large or small. So I think what the president is trying to balance 2 things. He's trying to wean the states off FEMA so that they're not, just automatically expecting the feds to step in and pay for everything. At the same time, you can't just cut them off entirely. You've got to wean them off. And the Governor Huckabee, I've read her letter. I listened to a couple of interviews that she's done. She knows what the process is, that there's usually an initial denial, and the FEMA will say, here are the figures we have in terms of damage assessments and everything else. And then they have to show that that is way beyond their capacity. And I'm sure she's had people in the field assessing that so they can show the president, look, we can't afford this. Which, may or may not be true because I don't have those numbers yet. But once that appeal process is completed, if they get additional information, he will probably declare a disaster and they will get some money.
So you think
the bottom line is at some point we do have to start reining it in because it is out of control.
So let me ask you about that, because the president sort of, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're in this little we're maybe in a transition period or possibly getting there.
Yes.
Where the president has basically said, you know what, we want to put FEMA back in the control, or at least the handling of this back in control of the states. It almost sounds like, Michael, that this is kind of what Republicans want to do with the education department and block grants back to the states.
Exactly, because you think about what FEMA has in 1979. FEMA was really was designed to take over the old civil defense authorities, which were, kind of the black ops programs about continuity of government and continuity of operations. And then it started expanding to disaster relief. And then that grew and grew and grew. And the more it grew, the more states became dependent upon the feds to step in. So that by the time I was FEMA director, it was virtually, we tried to turn down a few things, but the governors would appeal. And of course, President Bush would capitulate despite what our recommendation might be.
Okay.
And we would end up declaring it a disaster.
But, back to the analogy, Michael, though, of the education and block grants. Republicans are talking about getting rid of the education department and block grants back down to the states, right?
Right.
Yet I saw the education secretary, Linda McMahon, in the Oval Office yesterday with the president about all these executive orders that he's signing that he needs the education department to do. And I see you smiling there because you know where I'm going with this is maybe give it back to the states, and eventually the states, God forbid something bad happens, they're going to say, hey, federal government, hey, Congress, we need the help. And that's kind of the yo-yo, is it not?
It is exactly the yo-yo, and it is exactly the problem that I think this president faces. He knows in his gut that we've got to cut this dependency from the federal government. You think about money that goes to the education department. If a taxpayer in Colorado, where I live, sends $1 of my income taxes to, let's say, the Department of Education, by the time that gets back to Colorado, it's down to maybe 25 cents. So it's inefficient, it's ineffective, it takes away local control. The same thing is true with FEMA. When we give grants to a fire department in Arkansas, let's just pick on Arkansas for a moment. Arkansas now knows they don't have to spend $5 million on a fire truck. That's $5 million they can go spend somewhere else. And the more often that happens, the more they start shifting their budget requirements to the federal government and not back where it belongs with the states. So I think the president is on the right path. But weaning somebody else, it's like weaning a drug addict off heroin or fentanyl or anything else. The more they're addicted to it, the longer it's going to take for them to recover, and there's always going to be relapses. It's a horrible position we've gotten ourselves in terms of federal dollars, no matter what the agency is.
All right. I got to leave it there. Michael Brown's the former head of FEMA with us tonight once again. Nice to see you, sir. Talk again soon.
You too. Take care.
All right. Well, a lot, and I mean a lot, has happened as the president approaches his first 100 days in office. Have you heard? Our Brian Enton is driving across the country, talking with everyday folks about what they think about this administration. You can see his live reports all next week, starting on the Hill Sunday, and then right here on the Hill, 6 o'clock Eastern. Enton and what he's seeing. And then, speaking of have you heard? Next Wednesday, Chris Cuomo holds a special town hall on the president's first 100 days, and look who else is going to be there, too. Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith, and President Trump. The pre-show starts at 7 o'clock, followed by the town hall, only on NewsNation. We hope to see you then. But before then, coming up tonight here on the Hill.
President Trump secured the border in a matter of 7 weeks. Today, as I'm talking to you, we have the most secure border in the history of this nation.
That, of course, the border czar Tom Homan touting the immigration crackdown. But a key part of the president's border agenda just got blocked. Have you heard who blocked it? What it means and what's next? And will crypto become king for political fundraising? I'm going to explain when the Hill returns. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. President Trump dealt a blow in the courts today when it comes to his ongoing battle against sanctuary cities. A federal judge in Northern California ruling that a Trump executive order seeking to crack down on sanctuary cities is likely unconstitutional. The judge blocking the administration's ability to ensure that sanctuary jurisdictions do not receive access to federal funds. Now, interestingly enough, the judge here, William Orrick, was appointed by President Obama, cited precedent in making his ruling against the Trump administration. The case he cited was a ruling about sanctuary cities also against Donald Trump in the first term. The judge even going so far as to say, quote, "Here we go again." But it might surprise some to learn about a specific potential ally emerging in the president's battle. The Democratic governor from California, Gavin Newsom, has promised the administration and ICE that his state will give its full cooperation when it comes to reapprehending an illegal immigrant who killed a young couple in a drunk driving incident. Oscar Eduardo Ortega Anjui was released after serving just 3 years. Now, to the wrath of some on the left, Newsom has also agreed to help the Trump administration pursue federal charges. Full panel here with me now. T.W. Origi, former communications aide to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Linda Tran, former senior advisor to the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Carla Sands, the former ambassador in the first Trump administration to Denmark and Greenland. And Naveen Nayak, president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. This was a big ruling against your guy. And he's your guy.
Yeah,
he's your guy. Yeah. Why'd you give me that look?
I don't know. I just the way you pointed.
Of
course, he's my guy. He's everyone's guy.
So where does the administration go from here? Because you've got this battle of these blue areas, cities, county, states, basically saying, look, immigration's federal law. You deal with it. We're going to do our own thing. And the judge from California, San Francisco, came in and basically put this on hold.
Yeah, I think it's also unconstitutional to stop federal law enforcement from doing its job. I love it when Democrats are beating down the doors, talking about all the things that Trump is doing that are breaking the law. And I believe these sanctuary cities are breaking the law. Look, I think this is really bad PR for blue states. I think that's why Gavin Newsom is moving to be more hospitable to ICE agents. In every state where there is a sanctuary jurisdiction, there is a horror story with real implications behind it. My home state of Massachusetts, just last year, a previously deported man from Honduras came back in, was charged with assault and attempted rape. He had an ICE detainer, and the Massachusetts authorities would not let ICE into the jail to get him. In Denver, they had to go onto the street to get a gang member who was released from prison, potentially putting people at harm. It's bad PR for the Democrats. That's why Gavin Newsom's doing that. It's lawlessness by these mayors, and they should be held to account.
What happens here, Carla, because now you can make the case, or at least lay out, that this has become harder?
I think it has become harder, but if you look at what's happened in the past, so he was upheld 8 years ago by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the most reversed court in the nation.
Yeah.
I think that Trump wins on this because this immigration is a federal issue. He has the right to deport illegal immigrants. He ran on this platform. Americans want legal immigration, not illegal immigration. This is about the culture and the content of our country. We want to control who comes in.
But isn't part of this here, it's not the right to deport, it's getting the help from the locals and that sort of friction.
Right. Well, they're not honoring those ICE detainers, right? In the cities and in the states. We want to make sure that we get first the bad hombres out, but we really want legal immigration. We want the illegals to leave.
Bad PR? TW says it's bad PR.
Well, first of all, the courts have stepped in, and it's kind of embarrassing that the president took the exact same approach that the courts rejected. And I think this isn't, I think the core point here is coercion. Should states be forced to help enforce federal law at the risk of losing federal dollars? And that's
really
really
lawlessly.
That is not the case. They're not actually doing it. The question is, should federal officials take resources away from other things to help the federal government? They're not preventing the federal government. There are maybe individual cases, but the theory here is that we're going to take away your federal grants if you don't actually do what we want you to do.
You just slipped in there, though. There may be individual cases, right? And isn't that part of the thing that in some cases the states do want the help, and then in others they basically say,
well, listen, Gavin Newsom's engaging on one specific case.
He's running for president. That's
but he's
why
running on a specific case where there was a violent crime. I think there's going to be a lot more buy-in from both sides. You have not seen Democrats, for the large part, oppose the idea that people who are here, undocumented immigrants here who have committed violent crimes, should be deported.
Right.
That is not something they're opposed to. That is not what this president is doing. He is saying you get stopped for a traffic stop. We want local enforcement to actually deport these people. And that is not popular.
They're letting murderers
Hold on,
and rapists
I'll work you back in. But this is, at least on Gavin Newsom's part, sort of a little bit of a move. Linda, a little bit.
Well, it's kind of in the vein of all of the types of things he's been getting criticized by the left for recently, which is engaging in things like conversations with Steve Bannon and, broadening the types of things that one would expect that he might do. Set that aside for a minute. What Naveen was talking about was crime. And what I think is truly ironic about this is that part of the argument against supporting the federal government on this is that what these localities don't want to do is discourage undocumented immigrants from coming forward to report crimes. This is a very clear argument that they made the last go around, which is why you heard Judge Orrick say, here we go again. It's a real concern for them, which runs counter to what the administration is saying it's doing. The other thing I find really interesting is that the most recent polling this week shows that, again, what voters who supported Donald Trump really want is they want him to focus on the economy. They actually don't want him to focus on immigration issues. And this is by a large margin, 20% difference.
He believes, though, that this carried the election for him.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, there's the culture war piece of it, too.
You can walk and chew gum at the same time. You're the president of the United States. You're expected to do that. But secondly, look, I think Congress should then pull the money. Look, this is not uncommon in our country's history to dangle federal funds. Because we had bills in front of Congress that were voted on that would strip sanctuary cities of federal funding. It was it would have been a congressional mandate. They hold the purse strings. But moreover, this is not unusual in American history. After we created the interstate highway network and we created uniformed laws about speed and safety regulations, we said your transportation money is at risk if you don't do it. It is not unusual to use sticks and carrots to get people to act appropriately. But make no mistake, let's just underline this. Tom Homan's whole thing has been give us access to the jail so we can get people with ICE detainers. Democratic governors and mayors are saying no. That is patently unpopular, and they will suffer the consequences.
I think the key thing here, which is why this administration is going to keep failing, is they don't actually want to work to solve problems.
Of course
look at the southern border.
But they didn't have to work with anyone. They did that themselves. This is the problem with the president on the economy. He just wants to pass. He doesn't want to work with Congress to pass laws. He doesn't want to work with Congress to cut funding or to change funding. He thinks he can do anything he wants, and that's the way the world should work. Guess what? It's a democracy. There's a Congress. They write laws. They pass funding. Okay. Part of the reason this court ruled him out is that he does not have the power to cut this funding. Congress does. Go work with Congress. Go work with governors. That's what a president does.
On the contrary, Biden and Harris were actually doing so many things unconstitutionally. President Trump and his team do things constitutionally, and they want the states and cities to behave in a constitutional manner, or they're going to pull the money.
With respect, I don't recall there being more constitutionality in the last administration. Those conversations happening.
Absolutely. The border was wide open.
Let me leave you with this, Linda. If you were to speak to your party on this, what would you tell them about how to handle this going forward?
I mean, I don't disagree with the actions that these mayors have taken. They are being consistent with the laws that are implemented in their own states.
You don't think a part of the country will say, see, Democrats haven't learned a lesson from 2024?
I think that they are in their rights, just as Naveen made the point earlier, to be focusing their local budgets on what they consider to be priorities for their own communities.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank y'all.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Still to come tonight here on The Hill, why the president is going after a major Democratic fundraising arm and why it's not politics as usual. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports tonight, she will be talking to the FDA Commissioner Marty Makary as the Trump administration begins phasing out food dyes. That's coming up 7 o'clock Eastern. My take, other side of the break.
NewsNation Sunday, 100 days into President Trump's history-making second term, and Brian Enton is hitting the road, talking to voters across Middle America. Hear from all sides of the political landscape, driving the vote, starting Sunday at 10 Eastern on The Hill Sunday with Chris Stirewalt.
This moment for the vice president earlier today on his way home from a trip to meet with the Prime Minister of India. J.D. Vance made a little bit of a pit stop, you could say. The VP at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany to pour some brews for troops there as he visited with service members abroad. Now, Vance, who's a veteran himself, even made some time to partake, throwing one down himself after toasting the crowd and joking that the clip would, quote, go viral and not in a good way. There you see it. The VP is now heading back to the U.S. as President Trump is set to take his first foreign trip since re-entering office. The president and first lady scheduled to attend the Pope's funeral in Rome tomorrow. All right, time for my take tonight. Money in campaigns in a way that you've never thought about before. Reports tonight that President Trump is expected to target Act Blue. That is the major Democratic fundraising platform. Now, this, of course, reeks of politics, but there's also a legitimate concern about the role of foreign money in domestic politics. But did you happen to also see this headline? Trump offers private dinner to top 220 investors in his meme coin. Now, the president now recognizing those who bought the Trump meme coin, which he launched after he won the presidency and just days before assuming the Oval Office again. With the announcement, while the announcement described it as the most exclusive invitation in the world, the Democratic Senator Adam Schiff criticized it as, quote, brazen corruption. But the now isn't what I want to raise. Rather, it's the future and the question of this. Are meme coins going to be the next political fundraising frontier? Now, here's how it could work. Follow me here for a second. Create your own meme coin, announce a run for office, and then cash out over varying stages, including during the primary in general. Can he then fund a campaign with that money? Use it to make political ads, hire a staff. The 2010 Citizens United Supreme Court decision opened the floodgates for political spending. That was years ago, before crypto became a $3 trillion and growing behemoth. It is the new frontier, with an administration openly embracing crypto and skeptics concerned about things like traceability. So you have to wonder if Citizens United was just the start of how to address currency in politics. And that's my take. I'll see you tomorrow. Hope you have a great night.